Hey screen printers, today we're going to show some quick tips and tricks for printing simulated process or spot process screen prints. Today we're going to be printing a 5-color simulated process screen print separated with Separation Studio using spot process ink sets. So we've got our shirt nice and warm. So whenever you're printing simulated process, two things here is you're printing higher detail, so it's better to use higher quality shirts. Right now we're using a US Blanks ring spun shirt, kind of American Apparel style shirt. You can see it's giving us a nice smooth surface to print on. Also, by preheating our platens or our shirts, we're basically allowing the ink a little bit better area. You don't want to get them too hot now, but you also don't want to go on a cold surface. So the ink's going to receive better into a little bit warmer of an area. So the first print is very, very important when it comes to simulated process screen printing. And whenever you're doing your first print, you want to make sure that you've already run a little bit of production on test prints. You don't want to print with your ink right out of the container because the ink's going to be too thick and not going to lay down smoothly on the shirt. So you want to run your ink a little bit, either doing some test prints or kind of working it together on the bottom of your screen like you see that, to get the ink flowing through the screen nicely. And you never want to print in production your first screen print. So you always want to run a couple sample prints before you start production. So you can see now how much easier that ink's already moving as we're working it and running it, through the screen. And because basically the molecules in the ink are working together and becoming much more fluid and easier to print. So we're going to flood this print first, and then we want to make sure that when we're doing this first print, it is extremely important to get a nice, soft, solid base down onto the press, meaning that all the ink is releasing through the screen mesh onto the printing garment. Okay? To do that, a couple things that are very important. One, make sure you have proper off contact. So you never want your screen to be directly on your shirt. That works for 4-color process, but not for simulated process. Second, you want to be making sure that you're using a strong enough squeegee durometer and that your ink is running nice through the screen. So we're going to do a pretty, we have a 70 durometer squeegee right here, and we're going to have a pretty good angle. We'll put a good amount of pressure down that first print. So we can see here, oops, that my ink cleared all the garment right there in one pass because I worked it a little bit and it gave us a nice soft base. If you're using good ink, so that's Ryonet white with a little bit of reducer, about 5% reducer, and we worked it. So it flowed through that mesh nicely, and it's also not our first screen print onto a little bit warmer garment, not a cold garment. You shouldn't have to print that first print twice. That first pass that we just did is extremely important to getting a good print, because if it does not mat those fibers down, if it leaves those that fibrillation coming up through the ink, what's going to happen is the rest of the print is not going to look good. So that first print is actually the most important, making sure that your screen has proper off contact, you're using a tight enough tension screen, and you're printing on a little bit warmer area. You've allowed that ink to warm up and work together so it flows through that mesh. So we are going to flash that right now and then go to the rest of the colors. Okay, now that we've allowed the ink to flash, we want to make sure that it's just slightly tacky and it's not wet. We're going to go to the rest of the colors. Now when you're printing spot process, the rest of the colors are all wet on wet prints. So once again, we want to make sure that that ink is running nice and smooth in the press. So if we haven't printed with it before, we're going to work it. On an automatic press, you're going to work it a little bit, do a couple prints before you go to production. We're going to flood, and then we're going to do one solid print once again. If you have a good amount of pressure, good amount of angle, you don't need to do 2 passes. But if your ink's cold, your shirt's cold, you're going to have to do 2 passes to get enough ink down. So that's after one print. Okay, making sure that ink is moving nice and creamy through the screen. You see my print angle. I'm pulling because I can control my angle a little bit better, but I'm making sure that the screen is clearing behind me. So there's after the gold. We're getting a great ink deposit. This print is coming out looking very good. So green is next. Now you can see right here the screen's a little bit, hasn't been worked in a while. So we're going to once again work it in the bottom of the screen. Now once you're in the flow of production, you're not going to have to do that. But before you get into production, you really want to make sure that ink is flowing nicely through the screen. So as I'm working that, it's becoming much, much easier to print. And obviously if you're printing production, it's going to do that naturally. So flood it. Make sure all the ink's clear through the screen. There we have it now. Ink's coming together nicely. Everything's in good registration. And then our highlight white. Highlight white, also very important. Want to make sure that that ink is flowing, and this white is nice and creamy already because we just printed with it not too long ago. So we're going to flood up. Now I'm flooding when the screen's in the down position, but you notice I'm not actually doing any printing. My ink's staying up on top of the screen. Good pressure and angle. Make sure it releases and all the ink is left on the garment. And there's our final print, looking really awesome. Text is nice and crisp. And that is a 5-color simulated process print. And definitely slick registration and production ready. And there you have it, a couple quick tips and tricks to print high quality spot process screen prints using Separation Studio. Remember, the key is to lay down a nice soft base that's crisp and releases from the screen 100% in the first pass. That base is the key to a good quality screen print. Proper off contact, good tension, and a good flowing ink is going to allow you to accomplish that. Check out more information on Separation Studio on our website or YouTube channel.